Another interesting theme that emerged during our working group was this idea of tensions that commonly show up during the succession planning process and are things that companies need to grapple with as they kind of think about setting up and managing the process. One of these tensions is really whether we should be focusing only on internal talent. And by internal talent, I don't mean just within our organization. I mean specifically within a particular unit or part of the organization. Or should we be taking a more external, meaning enterprise-wide approach? And I think what we heard from the participants was that there's a lot of benefits, obviously, to a kind of broader approach that cuts across different business units. It can enhance the diversity of our talent pools. It can help us to identify hidden talent that we may otherwise overlook. It may help to reduce particular biases that leaders may have associated with the talent that's closest to them and they're most familiar with. But what organizations also struggle with is that leaders may be reluctant to look beyond the talent that they're most familiar with and really to devote the time and energy needed to scan more broadly. A second tension that I alluded to earlier is this kind of challenge between managing both company interests as well as employee interests. There are often cases in which high potential talent are really not interested in assuming leadership roles, even though they're seen as a good fit by others within the organization. And so again, it's really important to take into account employees' aspirations in the succession planning process, and also to consider whether there should be alternative career ladders available to those that would prefer to remain in more technical roles. A third tension surrounds the leadership success profiles that I mentioned earlier, or leadership competency frameworks. There's often a push that we heard in the meetings, particularly among leaders, to make these profiles often, very comprehensive, to really be, extremely inclusive of the various kind of competencies needed in various roles. But this can also make these profiles extremely complex and also somewhat unwieldy in terms of their actual implementation and utilization. So what we heard is that in many companies, there's really this push to simplify these profiles in order to make them much more agile. Certainly, this perhaps loses some of the specificity or detail associated with these profiles, but the consensus seemed to be that what you lose in terms of specificity, you really gain in terms of usability and usefulness. And a final tension that we heard that was somewhat more rare, didn't cut across, as many of the companies, but it certainly showed up in pockets, was really this tension over who should be primarily responsible for succession planning. Should it really be the responsibility of leaders, or should it be the responsibility of HR? I think we can all agree that in the ideal world, it should really be a kind of joint effort that's where HR is really facilitating and creating the process, but leaders are the ones that are, out front leading it. But what we heard from some companies is that there's often a situation in which leaders really just want to push this over to HR, have it be HR's responsibility. And so this really highlights the importance of making sure that leaders are bought in and really engaged in the process at all stages.